What is the most serendipitous mistake that you've made that has made its way into your creations?
Oh man, I hate that you're getting me on such a day where I'm so tired and I'm forgetting what serendipitous means.
Like positively, like sort of fortunate, like a good, a sort of a what would be a good definition of it? Like a positive sort of. Okay, I'm just going to look up the definition because I know what I'm trying to say. It means like fortunate, I guess. So yeah,
Starting this off on a great note.
yeah. at least see, I'm googling it. Yeah, occurring or discovered by chance in a happy or beneficial way. So something you stumbled upon, you're like, oh, that's sick. That would kind of be, you know, something you accidentally do, and you're like, oh, that was awesome. That was kind of the vibe I got from that question.
Okay, now give me the full question again.
What is the most serendipitous mistake that you've made that has made its way into your creations?
Oh my God.
It's a good question.
It is. I'm starting off real heavy here. I hate that I can't think of something right now that's made its way into my creations.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even. I hate to be that guest. I don't even think I have an answer for that. That is like quite the thinker. And
I mean, if it helps, when it normally happens for me is when I'm dragging stuff around in Logic and I accidentally drag something too far or not far enough. So what will happen is I'll like drag a drum beat that I've programmed or something, and I drag it like a beat too early, and I accidentally stumble upon this like really cool groove where I've pushed something back or forwards a beat, or like if I've written a couple of guitar parts and I just happen to put one with the other and they sound really good together. It's normally in Logic that I get this stuff, like when I'm just dragging things around, you know. I can't think of something where I've just like accidentally stumbled upon it. I'm trying to think if I have a good answer for that either. So if it makes you feel better, I don't have that would be my answer, which isn't that interesting. So
almost trying to think of something in the same context, like in my times of, you know, messing around with like our drum programming when writing. And I don't know if I've made any like slight mistakes. I feel like if anything, that's our guitar player, where he gets absolutely stoned and just writes to, you know, to a 4/4 click somehow when not everything is 4/4, and then he ends up making this crazy thing that works against 4/4 so smoothly to us in a way, but to other people it doesn't quite click. But I mean, in my own personal experience, I don't know if I've come across something like that.
The other thing I said, actually, going back to that question, I remember I said actually the thing that was kind of fortunate for me was meeting the producer that I ended up working with my old band, who was very sort of helpful for us, like developing as musicians. He was a very like he's very good at sort of imposing ideas without like taking away from what we did. And I happened to meet him just because like I had a singing teacher for like 3 lessons who forwarded me his details, you know. It was just like, and I just, because I wanted to try some singing lessons, you know, that was it. And I just was fortunate to then meet the guy that produced our whole kind of first body of work. And that was quite lucky, really. I maybe would have met him anyway. I don't know. But that was probably my best answer, because it's nothing to do with what I've done as such. But
it is kind of interesting how things line up in a way where it's like you don't expect it to happen, but it ends up being a pretty incredible experience. Like, I mean, similar thing like with our producer that we go to, we never thought that we'd cross paths. We liked the work he did, but we had no way of thinking that, you know, this guy could actually complement our music and help us find the best possible direction for our music, because it was almost like night and day from stuff he had done. But now I can't imagine making music with a different producer, and he's almost responsible for helping us sound the way we do now, and especially on our records and how we think about going about music forward. You know, I know we're kind of going off like the rails here a little bit, but just off on that subject, it is pretty incredible like what can happen like just based off an accidental meeting of a producer you didn't quite expect to run into.
Yeah, I every now and again I think about kind of the things that have led me to where I am, and I almost think like so like I ended up going to sort of a music school, but I dropped out of a university, and I just remember seeing a billboard for this music school. I was like, oh, I want to do music, so I'll go and. But I think like, what if I didn't see the billboard? You know, it almost scares me a bit, and I think like there's all these little things that take you to where you are now, and if you add them all up, the statistically the chance you'd be where you are feels so minimal, and I don't know, I find that all sort of existential and weird, and I don't know, when I look back on the connection of events that have got me to where I am, I almost find it scary that they could have not happened, if that makes sense. Bit of a weird thought process.
You're looking at that alternate timeline. It's like, what if I didn't? What if I wasn't in that exact place in that exact time? And where would I be now without that? So it is crazy to look at like, different timelines like that, or at least even think of what your life would be like, given you didn't meet that like very important time in your life, or that place you were at that took you down the direction you're at now.
Do you think you have, what do you think, if you could pinpoint a moment in your life that would be the biggest like tip in one direction, whatever it might be, can you think what that would, if like there was an alternate universe where something changed, something did or didn't happen in your life?
Yeah, there is this weird alternate timeline that I used to really dwell on back when it happened, but since then I'm glad it didn't kind of work out that way. But there was a time when I was, I think, just 19 or 20, and I was really I was pumping out a lot of drum covers at the time. I was trying to make a name for myself. My first band had just broken up 2 years prior, and it was like a progressive rock band that like eventually tried to become a pop band, and it all just kind of fell apart when everyone started going to college. And so I had really invested all my time into doing drum covers. And when the band Glass Cloud became a thing, I got heavily into them, and I was covering their work. And their drummer, Chad, at the time, he was very into my covers. They weren't that great, but he just, I think, liked the fact that there were drummers out there giving his work like the time of day and covering it, and also putting their own twist on it. And so when it came time for Chad to leave the band, he sent me a message asking if I was interested in trying out, or like, at least filling in for this like upcoming headliner tour they had. And I was like ecstatic that he was going to give my information to their manager and whatnot. And then sure enough, I never heard anything, and I was like, okay, I guess, things are going to happen. And then I was at a work event for my job, and I got a call from their manager with 3 days notice for their headliner tour, saying that the drummer that they had backed out, and they needed somebody to learn like 12, 13 songs and fly out like immediately. And I was like, it's almost too last minute for me. And I had all these fears about like losing my job and not having a job when I got back, because I didn't go to college. So like that fear kind of held me back from, just taking that leap and going on tour for like a month straight for the first time ever, especially with a band I loved at the time so much. But the timeline thing that I'm referring to is how Glass Cloud did that tour and one more tour after. And then just a couple years later, all of those members of Glass Cloud, other than the vocalist, got recruited for Immure. So I was like, if I had done that, I would have had my time in Glass Cloud, and I would have joined Immure, and I would have been playing these festivals to like 20,000 people. And I looked at that in the grand scheme. I was like, son of a bitch, I fucked up. And I like, even though I guess like at the time I wouldn't have enjoyed playing, like, I guess for Immure, I guess it was just a taste thing at the time, but I have since like become a fan, and I was just like, damn, I could have essentially been like grandfathered into Immure via Josh Travis, like, and I could have had like an earlier start to my career and a bigger like earlier start to my career. So that definitely kind of messed me up for a little bit, thinking that I didn't take that chance and what it could have led to. But also, I'm glad I didn't take that path, because I had invested all this time into my current band because I believed in it. And I was glad that I wasn't like completely wrong, because, you know, people took chances on us and they brought us on, and because they believed in us. So I'm very proud, like in a way, that I stuck to my guns, you know, and, you know, still pursued this band because I felt like there was something worthwhile there.
Yeah, if it makes you feel any better, I had an audition for a band that opened up Download Festival a few years ago, and it was when we were just coming out of COVID, and it was like a pilot event. So they played to like basically everyone, because they were the only band on, because they opened the festival and it was like a smaller thing. So literally everyone at the festival was watching. There's probably about 10,000 people watching it. And I auditioned for them, but I just wasn't very professional. Not like unprofessional, but I think I just didn't. I don't know, for whatever reason it didn't suit. But then the band fell apart, so I guess, you know, there is that.
Works out for a reason, yeah.
Yeah, but it would have been cool to play to like that many people. And it was like coming out of COVID, so everyone was just going absolutely nuts in the crowd. And I was in the crowd watching, like, that would have been good.
100%. And I was lucky enough to kind of witness that surge in post-COVID shows and whatnot, because our first tour post-COVID was like the best tour we could have possibly been on. And it was amazing. And it was like that first ever experience of, man, this is what tour is like when it's awesome. Like I've never experienced it like that, because we just had, you know, shit tour after shit tour, and then, you know, tour that was good that eventually fell apart halfway through or got canceled and all this stuff. So we just always felt like we were never quite getting the opportunities that we had hoped for, or at least having them stick out the way that we'd hoped. And then so coming back after not playing shows for nearly 2 years, and then getting thrown onto like a monster tour, and like nearly every show is sold out and people are buying our merch. They're curious about who we are. And it was amazing. And I was like, this is the height of, you know, live music. It was electric, to be completely honest.
Yeah. I find, how do you kind of, something I've been trying to be really conscious of lately is sort of just being grateful for stuff, you know, being sort of appreciative of what has come round, you know, because I think particularly as a musician, I say particularly as a musician, I think this probably applies to everyone, but it's so easy to sort of see what someone else is doing, particularly as a musician, because people put it all on social media and they share it all, whereas, you know, when other careers, it's not necessarily all about, you don't see people sharing like financial careers on Instagram, you know, or some people do, but, you know, particularly in this kind of world, it's very obvious when someone's doing well, you know, you see it all the time. So sort of being grateful for what I have achieved and what I have got. You know, we were just talking about like opportunities that we might have passed on or might have not been able to do for whatever reason. Is it something you've kind of, do you sort of grapple with that at all? That kind of like, you know, being grateful. You talked about having these sort of shit tours and then having a good one. On that sort of subject of gratitude, I guess. What's your relationship with that?
Well, this is funny. I was actually thinking about this fairly recently, you know, because it always seemed like when things like start to go good for us, something would kind of fall apart. So it's like I always appreciated those good moments and those good opportunities, you know, and I held them near and dear to my heart, and I expressed to anybody involved who took us out like how grateful I was for it, and, you know, what it meant to me and the band, and also because it was night and day for us, you know. And so I was very, very grateful for it. And, you know, like at times I felt like I didn't deserve the opportunity. I was like, there's so many other bands that would kill to be in this position. And then also I think getting a taste of that amazing sort of opportunity, it kind of made me jaded in some ways going forward, like when a tour wasn't quite as good, like the one we went on immediately after, there was just a big shift in the energy, I think, between not only between the bands and like, our personal issues that we all kind of had going on individually. So it like made me look at every little road bump as like a catastrophe or whatnot. Like, we're not making as much money. So like getting that first little taste of like post tour payout, it was my first ever time making any sort of money on a tour. And it wasn't a lot in the grand scheme of things, but just, being able to take something home at the end of a tour when you've never made money off of music ever, it was so great. And then on the next tour, it's like, you're not even making a cent. And, you think you're doing a great job or, you're doing the best you can, but then it's just things are kind of coming up short, and then mixed with like weird vibes between certain people and bands. Like, it made me look at things like, oh man, like, like this tour sucks. When in retrospect, it still was a great tour. There were so many people at every show still, but just because we weren't perceived the same as we were on like previous tour, and we didn't do as well financially, I guess it just made me look at things differently, to where I was like, I should still be grateful for this. Like, don't let one good tour get to your head or affect the way you look at music, because you've been doing this for so long without making a dime, and now you get $500 and you think that you're owed something every tour. Every tour is different, tour to tour, and lineup to lineup. And you may think that, you fit better on that tour than this tour, but you never know. It could go completely opposite. You never know. It's always a gamble, but you should absolutely be, I think personally that, I should be grateful and, I guess like humble is probably the best way to put it, about going into every tour and not expecting anything, just going in, doing your damn best, and just hoping that at least 10 to 20 people a show go away talking and be like, hey, that band was pretty awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's about how you frame it, isn't it? Like, I heard someone say recently that if you finish a workout and you're sweating and you're tired and your heart rate's high, you can feel quite good after that. But if you just had that, like if you're just stuck in traffic and then you suddenly had that feeling come along, you'd call an ambulance, And it's like, it's how, but it's, it's a bit of a weird analogy, but it's how you like frame, you can have the same feeling, but interpret it a very different way. And I think it's like, if that tour that you thought wasn't so great was the first ever tour you'd done or something, you'd be like, oh my God, we just went on tour, and I guess it's how you, like your expectations, I guess, going into it, which I've definitely been like, with some of the clips I put out on the podcast or something, like, some of it might get, I don't know, a couple thousand views and I won't be that interested. Whereas if that was the first, the first few clips I put out, we get like 10 views, so your expectations seem to just grow exactly at the rate that whatever you're doing is growing at, which is quite difficult to deal with, I think, because then if you don't keep growing it like at this exponential rate, your expectations start to sort of exceed where you're at.
It's like you almost kind of get ahead of yourself and get in your own way.
Yeah. I just managed to get about 5 million views on a thing with Finn McKenty, and which is the most I've ever got on it, like anything by a long way. So now if anything that's not getting that, I'm just like, like that was a real one-off though. I don't like I've never even topped the million mark on a clip before, but that was pretty
wild.
Nice.
Neither have I. Never like a million like on a single song, nothing. So I mean, hey, like that's awesome.
Yeah, but I bet anyone that's listened to your music has valued it way more than if you watch the clip as well. It's really dumb. Like, it's a really dumb clip, and I think that's probably why it went viral. I don't know, but like I teach guitar, and one of my students was like, "I saw you on Instagram earlier." It's like, yeah, you probably did. It's a weird moment. I mean, so I was doing the kind of browse of your sort of Instagram, and I saw you posted recently about sort of turning 30. Was that recent? How recent was that? I don't know how far I scrolled when I saw that.
That was August 17th, so like just just over a month ago.
Okay,
Much.
cool. Yeah, it just suddenly, as I was saying it, occurred to me. I was like, how far did I scroll? Like, this could have been, I could have been like 3 years deep at this point. But the impression I got from sort of reading what you were saying about it was sort of, you somewhat sort of, it felt like you were sort of taking stock a bit of where you're at, and sort of, acknowledging, I guess, where you're at in life. That's the kind of impression I got from just reading a very brief, obviously, description. Like, what do you kind of, does it feel, I mean, so I'm 25, I'm turning 26 in just under a month, so I'm not that far behind you, but I feel like 30 feels like quite a milestone. Is there anything about sort of that particular moment that makes you reflect on like where you're at and what you've done?
Yeah, I think it all just kind of stems from, my parents and like looking at them growing up, because I'm a child of the, the early 90s. And, back then, people were getting married and, having kids by like 23, 24 and whatnot. They're married and, have like a house or a mortgage or whatever it is. So like looking at it in today's perspective, I feel like even when you turn 30, like people still look at you as a child, or they, unless you have like all your shit together. So I was like, here I am turning 30, like I just got my first place, and with my brother too. So it's like, it was the only way I could make it work. Like getting my own place in New Jersey was like, having a roommate, and kind of just so happened that my brother also needed a place. So we were like, let's just make it happen. But I'm like, here I am at 30, like I'm single, like I'm not married. I don't have like a kid. Like it was just like almost kind of looking at it like I'm not quite where I envisioned myself as a kid. Like when I looked at myself and I was like, when I'm 30, I'm going to be playing rock and roll in stadiums, and, I'm going to be living my dream like all the time, and, expecting to just do music full time, and, kind of being where my parents were at when they were 30. And, over time, I just kind of came to terms with, you don't need to set like a time limit for, like all of these things to happen, or you don't need to set an expectation of like, well, I have to have this by 30 or have to have this by 35 or 25 even. Like, I just kind of looked at it as like, well, I'm glad I'm at where I'm at. It's not exactly where I thought I was going to be, but I'm grateful for everything that I have done, experienced, and what I still will experience, because even though I'm 30, I feel no different than I did really at, 25. Like I still feel full of life, and I've, been to Europe twice with my band, and, I've met a lot of amazing, people like doing what I do, and, and like I have a job that values me, and lets me tour as well. So I was like, screw the whole, like what could have been, like, at your idea of what 30 should be, and just look at what you have now. And I'm grateful for it. I do have my own place, and I do, have good things like going in music. Not exactly where I thought I would be when I was like 6 years old, but I'm still making uncompromised music, stuff that I and the rest of my band enjoy. And, there are people out there who like what I do, and they want to see it, and they want to hear more stuff. And I'm just grateful that I even have that, because even that sometimes it feels like an unattainable goal,
Yeah, I think I can definitely resonate with that thing of like, you expect to be at a certain place by a certain time. And I think I'm definitely guilty, particularly like, but again, I think it's because we're so exposed to it nowadays. You see that like everyone, the amount of people you're exposed to, by default, if they're successful, you know about them, or that your friend knows about them or something, and I think seeing so many people do, especially at my age or even a bit younger, you look at guys in like Polyphia or something. I don't know how old. I think maybe Tim Henson's about my age, something like that. I think
pretty young.
Yeah, he's definitely a young guy. He's and then I mean, you see some of these virtuoso guitarists who are like 7 years old. You're like, wow, okay. That's depressing. But that's like a whole new level. That's even beyond. That's beyond my sort of But yeah, I definitely can resonate with that. You think, oh, I'll be here when I'm this age, here when I'm this age, and I think I feel like I'm definitely past the age of like university and sort of fucking around and stuff. I feel like, okay, I've got to like, not grind starts now, but like when you start to see people a little bit younger than you and they're doing stuff that's a bit cooler than you think you're doing now, it's very like, I feel like age is this thing that you can let it get under your skin a bit. I always used to like, I'm a big like Mark Tremonti fan, and I was looking at like, how old was he when Creed blew up? And I was like, why does that matter? That doesn't matter. Like, doesn't affect my life.
And like, it's like you look at it, it's like the different time, different place, and that's the weird thing is, in the 90s, it seemed like just there were so many like bands like popping up like out of nowhere that were just getting massive, and you look at that today, like in terms of like progressive and metal music and whatnot, and you're like, how come it doesn't work the same? And it's like, well, Creed was writing like solidified hits and to stuff that could be played literally like they did in a football stadium or whatnot. And you look at stuff like in nowadays, like in like the world of music that you live in, and you're like, man, like, and you start to think about like what you said, like how old was Mark Tremonti like when Creed blew up? And it's like, well, that's a different case, and it works out differently for everybody. Like sometimes you just end up knowing somebody and they kind of get your foot in the door, or sometimes you're just like in the right place at the right time. And the whole age thing, it did freak me out for sure, like considering in that situation particularly. I would see, like, I was like 24, still not like in a band, like doing tours or signed or whatever. And I'm looking at members of bands joining bands at 18 and like having a massive following and then quitting that band before they're even 20 and then going on to bigger opportunities. I'm like, what the hell? Like what am I doing wrong here?
I think there's also that little bit where you look at a musician that in your head you're like, I could do that better. There's always that kind of part, especially when you especially someone where obviously the kind of music you do is so technically proficient, like it that there's so many drummers that you'd see, I'm sure, where you might not look at it and go, I could do that, but like but there would be so many people you could see and go, oh, I'm sure I could play that, just casually. I guess particularly as a metalhead, if you see any band that isn't doing metal, you're like, man, that's easy, I can do that. Unless it's jazz, and then it's like the curve inverts and it becomes impossible again.
It's some like, because I had been playing with Sentinels and having to play such demanding like technical stuff for so long, when I had to take a step back from that and focus on something else that I'm working on for a fill-in gig, it's a lot simpler. And I was sitting back, I'm like, okay, like this is very easy compared to what I'm doing, but why am I having such a hard time grasping like what I'm supposed to be playing here? And I think it's because like there's less notes in a bar in their thing as opposed to in our thing. Whereas we're cramming it in with, all these different subdivisions and how many notes can we fit in here and all that insanity. And then I'm looking over here at like a simple, like good solid backbeat groove. And I'm like, why is this so hard for me? It's like I keep naturally overplaying it, but I'm like, you're not supposed to overplay it. It's a fill-in gig. You got to stay true. And it definitely was a learning curve where I was like, oh, I could do that. No problem. Like a little bit of ego there, like not intentionally, but just almost naturally was like, oh yeah, I could do that. And then sitting down to play it, like, it's like, man, I'm messing up a lot. And so it made me look at that like from a whole new perspective again.
What do you think's the hardest thing about nailing a simpler part? And I mean, a drummer that comes to mind for me is what's his name? Sugarfoot is his like nickname, isn't it? Michael Jackson's drummer.
Like Moffat.
That's the one. Yeah. He just has some of these parts he plays are in theory simple, but there's something about what he does that's just really like just got pocket, as you guys call it, isn't it? Guitarists don't really. We guitarists don't give a shit about that. We just play whatever. So yeah, I mean, so what's the hardest thing as a sort of technically proficient drummer? What's the hardest thing about playing a simpler idea?
I think what makes it harder is the fact that, I mean, especially if you're playing for people, I feel like whether you're playing for an audience or whether you're playing just with yourself to a click track, if you're off by even the slightest beat, let's say you're playing something at 120 BPM, okay, like obviously off the top of heads we can't imagine the click, but you can imagine that nice simple mid tempo. If you're doing something like doof, 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 like almost matching the click exactly, if you're off by even the slightest hair, people are going to kind of notice that. You know, if you're playing something that's like and it's at that tempo, people in a crowd who are like, they're not going to notice, like if one of those extra eighth notes at the end of those sixteenths are off by a little bit, you know, because it's different. But if you're playing something that's all pocket, just dun da 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 dum bum 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 bump, something like that, you know, if you're off by even a little bit or you're not focused on nailing that part, people are going to kind of notice it. And I feel like people can detect a sloppier simple groove as opposed to a faster, more technical groove.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. I can do rock beat one on the drums. So maybe, just maybe, I'd be good at that gig. Probably not. I can literally I can do the most basic. I was gonna say I could do an AC/DC gig, but I couldn't do that at all. I could do the verses and then the rest of it probably
right.
Not. Yeah, that's as far as I've got with drums. With the stuff you guys play live, like how do you can you relax? Like can you sort of not switch off, but like sort of I don't want to say autopilot. It sounds kind of bad, but like, can you sort of, yeah, I guess relax is the right word. Can you relax into what you're doing? Or do you have to be switched on the whole time to keep a track of all of this stuff?
I'd say it's about 50-50 for me. You know, now, you know, with playing stuff off of our last record, Collapse by Design, it's most of it is pretty second nature to me at this point, but there are parts I absolutely have to be on and I have to be awake and alert. But there are things which, funny enough, for some people, they're like, I don't know how you look so relaxed playing it. I'm like, because this is, weirdly enough to me, the simpler thing. And I can, if it's just like a double kick run with like a 3/4 hand pattern, like, and that's going for a little bit, I'm like, okay, like this is fine. But then once it gets to like the syncopated stuff, like where I have to like catch cymbals on like certain, you know, pickings or whatever, or certain fills or cymbal catches, I have to be very awake and alert. I guess it is kind of 50-50, but like I try to be alert, but I try not to be hyper like tense. Like you have to stay relaxed, or as relaxed as you can, because the more you tense up, like you're going to feel it in your muscles and you're going to miss things. You're going to be overthinking things. And then whenever you overthink the fill or overthink the part is when you botch it the worst. You just kind of have to rehearse it well enough in advance, stay relaxed, but still stay alert. Just don't be tense. But like that's my approach. I mean, it could be different for everyone else. Other people look like they're hyper, like laser beamed on to whatever it is next that they're going to hit, and they're super accurate about it. That's not always me. I learned this one like approach from drummer Mike Mangini from Dream Theater, and he talked about how he's always looking at like whatever he's playing, he's always looking at the next cymbal he's going to hit before he has to hit it, so that he knows he's on his target. And because it's like the rest of his stuff is in the back of his mind, but it's the next step that he's getting to. And I was like, that's pretty interesting. So I started to do that. I was like, in technical parts, like I'm going to look at whatever it is that gives me the most trouble, so when I get there, I'm not missing it, or I'm not, you know, hitting the wrong thing. And that has helped me. But I know it's completely different for everybody else.
Yeah, I teach a similar thing with guitar where if you're sliding up and down the neck and you don't know where you're going, it's like you can't like track your hand as you go. Like you can't react in time to like follow your hands around. You have to kind of look to, and you have to just know that the thing you're hitting right now, you're already there.
Yeah.
It's definitely, you have to sort of let go of it, I think, to be able to do that. Do you find like you can get into that kind of, that sort of flow state where, because I think obviously again the kind of stuff that you guys do, I almost feel like you couldn't play it without being in some sort of, like, I don't want to say not just necessarily a flow state, but that kind of, you know, that state where you sort of lose awareness of time. You're just kind of doing the thing. Is it often that you find yourself in that kind of mindset where you, I guess it is that flow state, you know, where you sort of wake up at the end, you're like, oh, we just played a gig, you know, or are you quite conscious the whole way through?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely shows where I have consciously had to kind of take a back seat a little bit and just, you know, relax, especially when I'm sick on the road. Like that will definitely put me in a place where I have to kind of relax more than just, you know, focus. But the thing, like for me, I also love putting on a performance, like not just playing a technical set and playing it perfect. I don't mind if I make like a tiny little mistake here or there, if it means that I'm putting on a good show for the crowd. Because one common thing in technical and progressive music is sometimes, or a good portion of the time, when you go to see the band, they're not very animated on stage. And I know some people are cool with that and they don't mind, like they just want a tight, good performance. That's great. A lot of other people, they want like an energetic performance. And I've always wanted to be like a solid drummer, but a performer as well. And, you know, a drummer that people could remember, or, you know, could be like, hey, like that drummer, like he puts out a fun show. He's pretty theatrical or whatever it may be. So it's like, I when I get on stage sometimes, especially if the energy in the room is electric and, you know, like everyone's feeling good, I kind of almost take on this like wild man personality behind the kit, and I end up just going a little bit more nuts. And sometimes I will tend to have a few mess ups here and there, but I end up always having a much better time. But when I am just kind of laid back, getting lost in it, it feels good to kind of get lost in it. But afterwards, I'm just like, I don't feel as fulfilled, you know. But it's like when you're sick and trying to just not overexert yourself and pass out on stage, you know, it definitely doesn't feel as great, like emotionally after the set. Like when a show is great, I'm jacked up. I'm feeling amazing. But when I have to kind of take that back seat and just calm down and not go as hard on my vocal parts as well, it's a bit of a bummer.
Yeah, I feel like jacked up is a very American phrase. I've heard, but I don't. Does it mean good? Because I thought it meant bad. Or is it a good thing? Because I only think, all I can think of is David Goggins when he would say he's all jacked up, and I assume that means he's like his knees messed up or something, you know.
Yeah, see, it's funny. It really just depends on the context, I guess. Where, like you said, like my leg's all jacked up right now, but like also it's like I feel like it goes to like a gym phrase. Oh, I'm jacked up right now. I love it. Or, you know, and it's you're hyped up or whatever. But yeah.
I know what you mean. There's a few phrases like that where, well, like you can say I'm down for something or I'm up for something, and they both mean the same thing.
Exactly.
Who invented that?
It's so funny. Like I saw a video on that like recently where someone was like breaking it down where they're like, if you're up for something, you're not really down for it. But like it's not as serious as being down.
Yeah, being up for something is like you're open to it, but being down is like, yeah, I want to go.
Exactly. That's how I've always kind of looked at it, you know?
I never thought about it. So being down for something is more, yeah. I'm glad we're learning things.
Being down is way more positive than being up when you're up for something.
Yeah. That's I never thought about it that way. Yeah. No, that's yeah. sorry, I just do this where I like you'll be making a really relevant and an interesting point, and I'll just pick up on the most pointless kind of part of whatever it was you were saying.
You're all good. I do it all the time in my own personal life.
So like again, I was sort of doing your sort of browse or friendly stalk of the social media stuff. And actually, well, I know this from when we were talking anyway. You're talking about sort of moving to this new place. And I feel like there's something about that kind of feeling of a fresh start, or maybe not a fresh start, but like some sort of a refresh. It feels refreshing, I guess, when you move or when you change environment in some way. But it also can feel a bit daunting, I find. Being in a new. It feels like it's certainly to me like when I moved here, it felt like another chapter. Yeah. How have you felt about kind of moving to this new place? You say it's getting your first place as well. Like, does it feel like a new chapter, or does it just feel like business as usual? Like, what's that kind of felt like?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a mixed bag, but I mean, I love having the independence. I love, having somewhere to call my own. Even if it is shared with my brother, but like it's going from like a full house with like parents and my other brother, and then pets, and especially pets who for some reason just don't seem to like me that much. So I'm like, which is a rare case. Everyone else that I know, their pets adore them, but mine, they're like super weird to me. I'm like, okay, well, and so there was always weird little like underlying tension in the house where I felt like I just couldn't really like relax as much or whatever. But I mean, that just kind of happened more as I got older, and I was just kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, God, I really need to get a place of my own. And just like, I need some sort of independence. Like I'm nearly 30, and it just kind of worked out in a way where it was finally possible. But yeah, it does feel like a new chapter. I'm not very far at all from where I moved from, like pretty much very close. But I mean, I still feel like it is a totally new chapter, and I love it here. I mean, there's things I wish I could change, but landlords and stuff, it's some restrictions there, so it doesn't feel completely mine. But we've done our best to make it our own space and make it a reflection of like who we are and what we like. So I'm cool with it. I like the energy here. It's much more tame and quiet, which is kind of how I like it for the most part. And then
it's how I like it for my tech death metal. Yeah, tame and quiet in my tech death. Yeah,
yeah.
Is that the kind of what genre would you guys? Is that what? Because I never know with the more like, particularly with metal, like there's so many. You get the wrong subgenre, and like you're entering into a fist fight. Like.
It's absurd. I mean, I wouldn't call us a tech death band because we're not death metal or not even deathcore for that matter. It's weird. We've always been like a, genre. Like we've always been ambiguous, I guess, in terms of our set genre. But I because of that, I just like to boil it down and say that we're progressive metalcore, because when you boil it down, I mean, we are a metal band with breakdowns, which is where the core comes in, and we are progressive because things are constantly changing and evolving. So, but then for people who are very like ignorant to metal as a whole, I just tell them we're a metal band. But then you get those follow-up questions like, oh, like Metallica or like Rob Zombie. How about that AC/DC? I'm like, yeah, it's just like that. I try to just say we're a metal band because at the end of the day, yeah, we are a metal band. But yeah, subgenres, it gets so out of hand sometimes. So I guess for people who are more in tune with genres and care that much, I say progressive metalcore. Other people say we're gent. I'm like, that's fine. But I've just come to hate the term gent as a whole when describing a band, because when you think of gent, usually it automatically gets like a ugh. Like that sort of things. Gent is very frowned upon nowadays, especially if it's like gent that's like by the book, or if it's like following the original trendsetters. You know what I mean? Or like almost like the imitations that came afterwards. Like super hollow guitar tone, like spacey ambient leads, and then Superior Drummer 2.0. Like that's
Yeah.
so like when people are like, "Oh yeah, they're a gent band." I'm like, "Wait, let me defend this." You know, like yeah, it's absolutely genty, and we have influence from genty bands or whatever, but I think using that as a blanket term can be like, make or break for some people.
Yeah. Well, can you imagine if like someone, you say you're a metal band, someone you didn't think liked metal, and they'd be like, "Oh, like gent." It'd be so confusing. Like, how do you know what that is?
One does throw that out at me when I'm describing. They're like, "Oh, like gent or like Meshuggah." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, sure, absolutely."
Yeah, cool. It's closer than Rob Zombie.
Yeah, damn straight. I mean, like the song we dropped today was like, for the most part, like completely Meshuggah worship. So,
Yeah.
like, we absolutely do not hide that influence whatsoever.
Yeah, I've recently kind of got more into Meshuggah. I do like the timings. I wrote something that had a 5/, I don't even know what it would be. It was a snare and a kick pattern in a group of 5, but it's in a 4/4 beat. I don't know what you'd call that.
Unfortunately, my musical education is non-existent, so I'm so much like a feel guy, and so it's when it comes to numbers, like I can break it down if I'm counting it, but like in terms of like 4/4 and a grouping of 5 and stuff, like it kind of loses me like that.
Yeah.
I have to feel things out, but that does kind of almost serve as a handicap to me sometimes. But
I feel like it's a better way though, isn't it? Like if you understand it, like if you actually take it in and you know what it is, it doesn't matter what you call it. That's just what you tell. That's just what you communicate with other people, isn't it? I guess it's more about feeling it out.
Interpretations of the same part.
Yeah. Well, I had a sort of what I thought might be quite a fun question is, and it kind of rolls off of what we were just talking about. If you were to sort of make like, I guess, an advert for what you guys do to just someone who is not even a metalhead in the slightest, what would you how would you like sell the appeal of this kind of more technical genre of metal or subgenre of metal? What, if you met someone who wasn't a metalhead at all, didn't even know who Metallica were, or maybe they know Metallica because everyone knows Metallica, but not everyone knows Rob Zombie, so they don't know who Rob Zombie are, but they know who Metallica are. What would you say is the kind of the thing that draws people into what you guys do?
Like the set thing. For us, I mean, in our particular case, and how I always like tried to describe it was controlled chaos, because the specific sound that we try to go for is when it comes to the heavy parts of our music, I always try to say that like we strive for aggression, whether it's with vocals or without vocals. We like an aggressive sound, or an aggressive take on our sound. And when it comes to the pretty stuff, we love creating like an ambient soundscape, like something that like you can almost feel it, like when you're in the car. It's like the way it's produced. We like you to be able to like feel our music in a way, not just hear it. And so I don't know, trying to describe to someone who has like no knowledge of metal or anything. I mean, I would just say like controlled, beautiful chaos. Like that's what it is. And like if you have a natural tendency, to be drawn to that stuff, then perhaps there's something there you'll like. I don't know. That is difficult, trying to almost market yourself to someone who has no experience with metal whatsoever.
Yeah, it's a difficult, and I think that part of why I find it interesting is like in the right context, people love what metal sounds like. I mean, if you go to some of these, like go to like some of these raves and stuff, how heavy the music is. It's just a different presentation. It's heavier than some of the like classic metal stuff, but people go, "Oh, I don't like metal though," and then they'll go to these like D&B raves where it's just like till 6 a.m. of just this intense, build-ups, drops, the whole like for like 6 hours. It's like you do like this thing, you just don't like the presentation, maybe.
Yeah, it's pretty funny that you say that, because we on our last tour, one of the last few days, we were in Tilburg in the Netherlands, and we were playing this venue with like multiple venues inside of it, essentially, all different rooms. And we were playing the smallest room there, and then there was a massive room, which I was under the impression that the tour we were on was playing in there because the tour had been doing so well. I was like, oh, this is where we're playing. That's pretty crazy. And I got there, I was like, oh, we're not playing there. They're like, yeah, that room's unavailable because there's a rave going on tonight. And I was like, whoa, like a European rave. And we all got to experience what that's like. And we're in, the small room up there playing metal to like, I think like 350, 400 people. And then you go down to this rave room and there's like 2,000 people, all like, absolutely tripping on drugs, like, or drunk and just going at it. And it's just like all like the same thing for like hours. I could take 20 minutes of it, funny enough. It was just like the environment that wasn't for me, but like the music itself, I'm like, this is cool. Like, but it's so funny to look at all those people and think like, you can take 6 hours of this, but you couldn't handle like 30 minutes of that. Like, it's pretty similar in ways. It's just like you said, the approach and like how it's packaged essentially.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did some work for the social media sort of people at Boardmasters Festival here in the UK, and one of the D&B like tent. It wasn't a tent. It was just a big stage, and I went around getting some like videos for like TikTok or something, and it was quite late at night. And obviously, so things were like starting to pop off, and everyone was on drugs, man. Like everyone. And I got all these videos. I'll show you at the end, actually, the little compilation video I got. And it's just, you watch the video and you're like, at least 2/3 of them are on, like, they've not just been drinking things, things have gone up their nose as well. Like, there's no way that's just alcohol. I'm just looking back at the video. I'm like, oh, I put this on their Instagram. Oh well, got a decent few views, so that's fine. But
and it's so funny too, like when thinking about stuff like that, whereas like back in the day, and even still sometimes today, like people who are very ignorant towards metal music, they think that that's how all metal fans are. That we just like getting trashed and strung up on drugs and losing ourselves and acting ridiculous, when it's like, no, like everyone in here is all looking out for each other. If there's a mosh pit, people are picking each other up immediately. It's all like a unit, like a unity of all different types of people coming together and enjoying like this thing together. But like at like an EDM show or DMB, it's just everyone's like kind of that
is the
like,
face. That's exactly the face.
In their own little groups of like 2-3, like no one. It's not like really this community thing. It's just a bunch of people getting together, like, and tripping drugs. And I'm like, no. I was like, the type of personality you're talking about is, electronic music. Like,
yeah,
not much of that in metal, but yeah.
It's it was just so funny watching all these people just like complete, like not even close to being sober. And I suppose there's a lot of sober people in metal as well nowadays. That seems to be a thing.
Straight edge hardcore and metalcore.
Yeah. Do you know what? I don't know where that's come from. Is it just come from like a backlash to kind of the sort of I don't know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll kind of thing, or like it's just people that want I don't know. Where do you think that kind of comes from?
I mean, I can't really begin to think where it comes from, but at least the few people I know who live like the straight edge lifestyle, like some of them are very just like, well, just never felt like drinking, never felt like doing drugs, and I don't know, I'm cool. And then other people are just like so like egotistical about it, like, oh, you need to have a beer to have a good time, like, fuck that, like straight edge hardcore, bitch. Like they're so loud about it, where you're just like, geez, like, and it almost becomes like a reverse, like judgmental thing. And it's very, very strange. And I never got it. I'm like, look, man, like whatever you like, just, I feel like for me, I'm like, as long as you do like in moderation, and it's just like, say you want to take mushrooms here and there when you're hanging with your friends or you're listening to music, like whatever. But it's like, as long as you're not doing it to a point where you're endangering your own life and others, and it's like, whatever.
Mm. Yeah,
The
it's
way
not.
like, culture and music is it's pretty strange.
Yeah, none of that stuff's sort of legal over here. I don't know what it's like where you are specifically, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know what direction it's going because I know like weed's legal in quite a lot of the US now. I think.
Yeah, it's becoming legal and or at least like decriminalized in a lot of parts of the states. Some like cities though within states like have their own special, laws about it. But personally, I don't smoke weed or do any like other drugs. Like I drink at the most, but like I mean, so I don't really pay attention to it. But like I hear enough about it like from my guitar player, my bassist who are like really into smoking weed and hanging out. So I mean, like, they're pretty hip to it, but yeah, it was surprisingly difficult, I guess, for them to like, be able to get like their one joint or something like that in parts of the UK. Like it was almost like you had to sneak it again. I'm like, wow, this is interesting, like back to basics. But then
Yeah.
in I think the Czech Republic, we just walked like we're walking down the street, this nice little building, and then there's a little cutout and there's this guy just selling pre-rolled joints and all other stuff. I'm like, oh, it is just case by case here, I guess. Who knows?
Yeah, it's weird. There's parts of Europe where it's just been legal like the whole time, which is just odd that it's not that far away. But I guess the language barrier makes it feel further away. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. But, well, that's me getting onto all sorts of nonsense. I had one more sort of question that I think would be kind of for the drummers out there. When it comes to writing the kind of your sort of, again, the more technical kind of stuff, how do you kind of achieve a sort of dynamic range in your playing? Because I think it's very easy just to be all up here, and even if you are all up here, you can do it in different ways. You can present it differently. How do you kind of keep some level of dynamic range in your playing in this kind of more busy, like fast-paced stuff?
I think in like my particular case with our particular band, there's a lot of freedom to to be able to experiment and try different styles or different patterns that you wouldn't expect to hear in metal. But I think like for me in that case where I'm lucky to have like this like almost like open canvas in a way where I can really just go in to like where like my into Logic and kind of temporarily like wipe out what my guitar player Chris had written and then like just try out like in my own head like what also works at this tempo and this feel, and I just kind of will go until I feel like something sticks. So but I mean I think also like getting a good understanding of rudiments is very very integral to it, like advancing your playing and being able to open your world up a lot more. Literally one rudiment called the 6-stroke roll that changed how I played for forever. I had been playing at that point for like 23 years or 24 years, whatever it was. And when incorporating that into my playing, I realized just how much more I can do and how much more creative I could be on the kit and how much more I opened myself up. And there's all other types of rudiments where, drummers will just hear it played on the snare or whatever. And they're like, okay, well, how do I like, cool, I can play it on the snare, but like that fill is going to get boring. I'm like, yeah, you can apply it all around the kit, or you can just, take this hand where it is here, you put it on here instead, or, just kind of move it around the kit and, just be free. Like when it's just you in your practice space and you're playing along to this stuff, just, don't be afraid to try things and get weird. There is no rule essentially to what you can and can't do in music. Like people like to say there are, or if you want to achieve, success in like the most blanket definition, but if you want to, be true to yourself and try different things, just, let loose and just do what feels good to you naturally. But I think getting a base understanding of rudiments and how they can be applied to the drum kit can absolutely change the way you play, like in the grand scheme of things.
Nice. I can do a paradiddle. That's it. Or I could do a paradiddle diddle. Don't you? Can't you do the double at the end?
Paradiddle diddle.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
So it is a thing. I didn't know if I just sounded like an idiot then.
A diddle diddle.
Yeah. I could do that, and I think that's it. I don't know. What's a 6-stroke roll for me?
So I've seen it written out like 2 different ways, where it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like, you know, right, left, right, left, right, left.
Mm-hmm.
But the way I learned it was like it begins and ends on an accent, and then the 4 strokes in the middle are ghost notes. So that when you
I know that. Okay.
Yeah. So that when you loop it, it almost sounds like it's
yeah. Okay. I could hear that in my head the moment you said it. Yeah. Okay.
So right, left, left, right, right, left. And then when you continue it and loop it, it almost has like this cool like so it creates this flow, and then when you speed it up, you can go like around the kit like and incorporate it all over the place, and it makes for a tasty sounding fill almost every time.
Oh, cool. I'll bear that in mind when I'm programming mindless drum beats for whatever poor drummer I eventually try and recruit to play all that stupid crap that I'm doing. Cool. So what I need is a question for the next conversation to start that one, and also an artist that you want to plug to the world.
An artist I want to plug to the world. Oh, man. So a question, an opening question.
Yeah, so an opening question. You can pick absolutely anything you like. You can see our conversation kind of went all over a bit, so you can set me up to fail. You can do whatever you want, or you can make it interesting. I've had some really wacky ones.
Yeah. See, my like constantly joking brain wants to just go with like the simplest, dumbest thing. Like,
do it.
So what did you eat today? Like, but I mean, like that's stupid. The one
that Justin, because we were just speaking about him before the podcast, the one that he asked for the next guest, he was asking like, why do you do music? But the way he phrased it was something along the lines of, why would you even do that? Which I just thought was really funny. So I asked that question. It was to Jay from Tesseract. And I asked him that, but he got what I was talking about. But I thought I said to him, I was like, I've got the silly version and then the proper version, but he got the silly version, luckily.
I like it. That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Damn. I feel, sorry, bear with me for a second here.
You're not the only person. Actually, you're in the majority of people if you need a second to think about it. I don't think anyone's just got your perfect question.
Hey, I'm trying to think of a question for somebody who I have no idea it's going to be.
Anyone.
Okay.
I know who it's going to be.
Oh, yeah, of course. You're the host.
I don't know. There's been times where I don't.
What was if okay, if there was a moment where you felt like giving up in what you do, like whether it's your passion or your hobby or your career, what was it that made you get back on the horse, essentially?
Nice. Yeah, that's a good question. I like that one.
So I feel like in a way, like that was almost like a question or something I had to think about recently, like in terms of like our own band, like just we thought for a hot second that we were about to put the nail in the coffin for sure. And then, we kind of gave it one more shot, but then like months later after all that, it just made me think about it. I'm like, wow, what was it that really, pushed that like past like just giving it up? So yeah, I feel like that's my question for sure.
I feel like it kind of brings a conversation full circle when we were talking about all those little moments that make, get you to where you are. Speaking of the first kind of thing we were talking about. So it's a nice kind of full circle moment for the conversation, which is good. Do you have an artist that you could present to the world?
Sure, like somebody rather like unknown, I guess.
I think, yeah. I mean, they can be known, but anyone that you think you want the world to know about.
Let me actually pull this out. Let me see what I've been listening to lately. That's get me going, if that's cool.
Yeah, that's all good. I was looking at this earlier on Spotify. I can't remember why I was looking at like my recently liked songs. And there's about 6 or so like random just new songs, and then there's just loads of Oasis because I saw Liam Gallagher, so I just forgot. I was like, oh, I haven't saved any Oasis songs, so that's what I've got.
Very, very British of you.
Yeah.
Respect though.
Good songs.
You know what? I will give a shout out to Chamber from Nashville, Tennessee in the US. They are another band, I guess kind of, I wouldn't say fully like ourselves, but appreciators of chaotic psycho music. And I think they don't get enough love. And that band is doing some really crazy stuff. Their drummer, Taylor Carpenter, is among one of like the best drummers out there today in heavy music. I think his approach to things is wild. I think anybody who likes stuff like the Dillinger Escape Plan would absolutely love that band. There's a lot to unpack there, and it's a wild experience. Their new album, A Love to Kill For, is fantastic. It's a head trip, but it's fantastic.
Awesome. And then anything you want to plug to the world?
Yes. My band Sentinels, we just dropped a new single and music video today for a song called Glitch. We have an EP, a 3-song EP coming out at the end of October 27th, called In Limbo, on Sharp Tone Records. Very proud of it. 3 songs, and I won't say too much more, but I'm very proud of it. I think it's a perfect representation of, the band and where we've been at for the past year. And it's, all kind of about picking up the pieces and moving on despite feeling stuck and stagnant for so long. And I think there's a lot to appreciate there. So I hope anyone listening to this, want to check it out.
Yeah, it's a good message. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Thank you very much, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.